All right, Brooke, afternoon. How's it going? What's going on?
Conrad, good to see you, man. It's been a little while. What have you been up to? Anything new in your life?
Yeah, an entirely new human new in my life. So yeah, we had a little hiatus here. So we were recording very much far in advance. We've worked through that whole backlog. You got busy. I had a baby, so we took a little time off, but that's okay. We got a good guest to come back to. So I'm happy. Everything is positive and happy and healthy in my household. I can't complain. So.
Well, congratulations. That's having another little baby in the family. I'm sure it must be incredible.
Yeah, it's interesting. The oldest loves her. Oh, how can I help? Very doting on his little sister and all very positive. And then the other ones are like, more less attention for me. They're not as excited. So it's funny how that goes, at least in my house. But yeah,
well, good stuff.
Yeah, well, we're pivoting into the spring season here. What's kind of on your mind, Brooke? What are you kind of thinking through as Vintory kind of gets going, kicking into motion fully in 2025? What are you thinking about at a high level? And then we'll introduce Tony here in a second.
Yeah, so I'm optimistic for 2025. Business is booming. We just had a record month, and we've got some new products we're getting ready to release here in the next couple weeks, which I'm really excited to talk about. So things are looking great.
Awesome. Well, Tony, welcome. For those listening to the podcast, they may not have heard of you before. I know we're connecting for the first time, so it'd be awesome if you could give the listener just a little bit of background, a little bit of context as kind of your story, how you ended up in short-term rentals, and then we'll dive into some questions after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. So I got started in 2021. Me and my neighbor, who was also my good friend, were like, hey, let's get into short-term rentals. And so we were looking in all the areas like Florida and Gatlinburg, kind of where everybody starts to look. We wanted to kind of travel hack, and we just couldn't make sense of it. And, we decided to just cut our teeth in our own backyard. So started looking about an hour away from where I live, which is Kalamazoo, Michigan. And my wife sends me this property over in Southwest Michigan. Never heard of the town. Checked it out. 3 out of the 4 of us said, yes, let's buy that property. I was the only one that said no, but I got outvoted. So we went with it. And, when we jumped into it, we were like, hey, if we could get like $500 a night, we'd just be to the moon, right? Well, luckily we had dynamic pricing, which bumped it up and just really started to blow our mind on what was possible in that area. So I think it maxed out at like $1,650. And I mean, it was like a old 1930s farmhouse, 4 beds, 2 baths, cheap land. I mean, it was not like this amazing luxury house or by any means. So we're like, hey, let's buy another one. So we bought another one, and then clients started asking us to help them find a property in Southwest Michigan. And then they started asking us to manage for them. So we started the property management company Book and Gather. Today we manage 30 doors, onboarding 6 more properties right now. And then bought a boutique motel last year as well, and married going on 16 years, have 3 kids of my own, 2 twins. Well, we have twins and then another boy. So all boys. It's like WWE in our house all the time. So never a dull moment for sure.
Nice. Well, yeah. Tony, do you recall how you originally got connected with Brooke and the gang over at Vintory?
Yeah, well, I think I seen him on LinkedIn, or I came across his book probably at first, 0 to 500. And I was like, wow, I love that title, 0 to 500 properties in 5 years, right? And so I think I connected with him, reached out on LinkedIn, asked for a connection request there, connected. And then I made this list of people that we wanted to interview on our podcast, and he was one of them. And I think within 24 hours, he's like, I'm in. So brought him onto the podcast. Love that episode. I think I've told him many times that it's the most referenced podcast, just with some of the stuff that he said on there. Again, kind of the marketing, coin waterfall thing there. So always mentioning that, and he's absolutely right. And we're seeing kind of the fruits of what he was talking about there as well. So
yeah, that was a fun podcast. And candidly, Tony, I'd never even heard of you before, but ever since then, obviously, I see you all over the place, and you're obviously constantly on LinkedIn, and I love listening to your podcast now. So it's good to have you pay the favor back and have you on ours. So thank you.
I appreciate it.
And we said this, we'll dive into mistakes here in a second, Tony, but we were talking before we hit record about this idea that maybe, the destinations that you're focused on are not in these top 10 lists, but that might be a good thing, by the way. Like, it might be a good thing that there's not investors piling in there from like every corner of the country, because a lot of the markets you named there a second ago have actually become really hard to operate in, right? Like the Smokies overbuilt, then the demand falls a little bit. You can go look at some of the data on that on AirDNA and see that they're probably in a little bit worse spot than they have been previous years. So being like a hidden gem, I don't think is a bad thing, to be honest with you. Doing a lot of the marketing stuff on my side, I could see it as a plus. What's kind of been your thoughts of being more that hidden market that not as many people know about as you've been growing?
When I connect with people and I tell them Michigan, I mean, their eyes are just like, they kind of step back a little bit. And until we start talking about, what we're seeing here and the type of revenue that you can see from a property, I think just before this call, we were talking about the record booking that we just got like 3 hours ago. I mean, I don't see those. I rarely see those numbers like in general, but no one would think that would happen here in Michigan. So, yeah, it is a tight market in terms of inventory, but I will say Southwest Michigan proximity to Chicago is like 90 minutes. So, and we have the most beautiful lakeshore. I mean, it looks like it's the Caribbean island, and again, just that strong demand from Chicago. We're getting a lot of high nightly rates. So,
yeah, I tell you what. I mean, honestly, Conrad, I've heard this before, and I've seen this before. That a lot of our partners that are most successful, they are not like launching in Outer Banks and Breckenridge and Vail, you know what I mean, in San Diego. They're launching in, like Southwest Michigan or Broken Bow, Oklahoma, or Hudson Valley, where, it's not the tried and true. I mean, of course, it's obviously been a tried and true vacational market for Chicago, suburbs and things like that. But, traditionally the old school vacation rental managers of past, like it's been something that just kind of like they skip over. But those are the markets I feel like usually have the best success. Like Tony Conrad, who we've had on the podcast before with Stay Maple, he did that out in or Blue Maple. I'm sorry. He was in like West Virginia and the Virginia mountains and things like that. Within like a hour and a half drive of DC. But like those guys are crushing it. Like so. It's these secondary markets. If people have asked me, where would you launch? I've told them, I said, I would not launch in the old school, heavily regulated, heavy competition type markets like those. So I guess it was just dumb luck, Tony, but it ended up working out really well for you.
And I think the opportunity really in Southwest Michigan and maybe even the market that you just mentioned is, I always say we're about 5 or 10 years behind where, Orlando or Gatlinburg is. So like the competition isn't that great, right? I mean, you can have a good product and still outshine 90% of the competition. Whereas down in Orlando, I mean, it's the top of the top and it's really hard to kind of break into the top of that market.
We had, when I was in Orlando for a while, we had 7 vacation rental management companies in our same plaza, to give you an idea. So people are like, you don't understand how competitive my market is. I'm like, I think I do. We had 7 in our own shopping center.
I'm picturing you broke right on the shoulders, like you don't even know, like just shaking them very aggressively, Yeah. I think what I've learned, Tony, over the years is like, if you could do this, take a paper map, of the United States, lay it out, take a Sharpie and just take every city and then draw like a little 2 or 3 hour radius and just start Googling, and you'll find stuff. We found clients that way in the past, just take that Sharpie, and I'm sure your Sharpie falls in that Chicago radius, right? And there's all those other places. So
yeah. And we say it's like perfect driving vacation distance, even for a weekend getaway, right? I mean, it's not just summer. It's not the week. It's like, hey, time to get out of the city for the weekend. They can come on Friday night. They leave on Sunday and still have their whole day in front of them by the time they get home in Chicago.
Yeah. Right on. Awesome. Well, let's flip the page a little bit and talk a little bit about what you contributed to Brooke's kind of ongoing series on mistakes. So we'll kind of go through these 10 here and kind of give me a few thoughts that you have about each one. So we'll dive right in. Number 1, the biggest mistakes have been holding on to the wrong team members too long. So training's hard, peak season is super busy, and you end up keeping the wrong people for too long. What's kind of been your process here, Tony, as you've grown and as you got more inventory, I'm assuming more team members now handling that inventory to find the right people and then move on from the bad people to bad fits?
Yeah. And it's almost like, hey, just getting a good person. So we had like somebody that was, I would say, below average. And then now we have like a real rock star. And the difference there is just like, it's not just 2x, right? I mean, it is 10x. When a team member actually loves the business, loves, the hospitality side of it, and is just like all in on it. I mean, it's a 10x in the business. And honestly, we brought him on in May of last year. And I would say without him, we wouldn't grow because, we'd be doing a lot of that stuff and the hand holding, where he's really taken on a big piece of that. And how did we find him? I mean, Steve Trover. So we had him on the podcast, signed up for his platform. and went through his process. And before it was like, oh, well, technically it was like, hey, this person worked in what we would say a hospitality industry, even though it's way different than like vacation rentals. So we're like, they'd be a great fit, bring them on. Not a great fit, right? And then hire this person who aced Steve Trover's process. And I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh, it was like a perfect fit. So I would say definitely utilizing, tools like the predictive index and going with Steve Trover has been a huge help on that.
And I love what you said on your mistake there. What Steve calls it, the 48 hours of pain. He and I've worked with Steve for 5 years, so I know pretty well. He changed it a little bit differently for me. He called it 48 hours of suck. Yeah. It's like 48 hours of suck, and he goes, look, Brooke, if you don't want to do it, I'll literally come in and I'll be the guy that comes in there and just says, you know what, it's not working. I'll fire him for you. If that's the thing that's keeping you from firing this person, I'll literally come in and I'll do it for you. I'll be the heavy for you, because it's exactly that. It really does suffer. I mean, it's the leading up to it, the actual firing of it. Nobody wants to fire somebody. And then obviously 48 hours after that, it really does, suck. But then it gets better. And you know what? Your team is usually like much happier too. So yeah, just pull off that Band-Aid. Just do it.
100%.
Yeah. Well, kind of the same vein then here, Tony, going over to your second one, holding on for the wrong inventory too long. So the wrong inventory can often come with lower demand or lower revenue and then higher demands from the owner. So if it's not a good fit, you're actually better off moving on from that too. So we just talked about moving on from maybe team members. Walk me through the other side of the coin, walking through getting rid of maybe inventory or homes that aren't a good fit for your program.
Yeah. So recognizing that early and often, and again, just moving on as quick as possible. I mean, we were managing in an HOA where we were getting a lot of clients that wanted us to manage. We bring them on and we just realized like this HOA, this area is just not an ideal fit. So again, similar to the employee standpoint, just 48 hours of pain, say, hey, 60-day notice, it's just not going to work out. We don't think we can really deliver kind of on your expectations with the way that the HOAs set up, or even kind of like different areas have different brands, I think. So just knowing what brand of area you want to be in is definitely a big part of it. So again, just moving quick. And I mean, it takes a lot of mental mind space when you have the wrong team or the wrong, wrong team and wrong properties. I mean, it can be a tough day. So you just feel a lot lighter and you can move quicker when you got the right inventory and the right people.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this every single podcast we've done. This was obviously highlighted in the book multiple times. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but yeah, I mean, it seems like this is one of the most popular mistakes that everyone makes. I mean, I was, when I was in Ocean City, I chased every single property I could up and down Ocean City. And then it took me about 2 seasons to realize, you know what, we just should really just focus on like the 5 core buildings, those 5 core buildings that generated 80% of our revenues and the minority of our headaches. Most of the headaches came from all the other buildings and properties and things like that. And then like, obviously you have the one-off owners even within those buildings that are just jerks, and your entire team is just like dreading talking to them every single day. And we literally just keeping an employee, it's hard enough, and then when you have just tyrant owner, it's just get rid of, again, pull the plug.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of owner relations when a property's not performing and you just can't deliver the results based on what the product is. There's just a lot of owner relations. I mean, they're constantly reaching out to you. So, I mean, just a lot of extra time and effort that you just aren't getting the results that you want to get from it.
Yeah. Maybe this one thing, Brooke, we haven't said though on this vein before. I actually said this to someone recently. When you're doing enough homeowner marketing, though, you feel more comfortable letting go of an underperforming or poorly performing listing because you have new ones coming in. It's almost like a relationship. If like that's the only person you're talking to, you feel like this desperation might sink in. But when you have 10 girls maybe you're talking to, of course, Brooke, this you're not doing that at the moment. But when you were a younger man, it's easier because then you can kind of pick the one that's best fit. So it's a funny joke, but I guess what I'm saying is like the more marketing you do, the more picky you can be because you realize, hey, I got new stuff coming in. I don't need to stress as much.
Well, remember in those early days, I mean, like you need every single dollar. I mean, again, there's a reason why these businesses are great because it's predictable recurring revenue. The problem is in the early days, you're only making just nickels, you know what I mean, on every single reservation. And it takes a certain point to actually make it where you actually are making money. So in those early days, if you lose that one property, and inevitably the guy or the owner that's a jerk is usually one of your highest performing properties. It's usually what ends up happening. So it's like, pulling that plug on them in those early days is really, really tough. But once you get to the point where you do have a lot of inventory and you kind of can be a little bit more selective, and you can kind of ask them to leave and, exercise your 60-day out, policy, then go ahead and do it. But yeah, it's definitely hard in the early days when you don't have a lot of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
Awesome. Well, this is something that you mentioned even a little bit, I think, earlier already, Tony, but talking about getting information or getting insights from people that are ahead of us, that's actually part of the reason that we do the podcast too, is like, someone right now is starting and they're listening to you and they're learning from you as well. But maybe talk about that a little bit. You give some examples here. You've already mentioned Steve Trover, Justin Ford, who we've had on the podcast previously, obviously Brooke, with us today. But what's kind of been like, what kind of people have you learned from, and what have you learned from some of those people that have helped you go a little bit faster or avoid some of these mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, it is a awesome industry. I'll say that. Like, everybody seems open and willing to share. It doesn't seem like cutthroat. I mean, everybody is willing to jump on a call, whether it's property manager to property manager. So I think I go even back to the beginning days, reaching out. We had none, reaching out to someone that had 3 to 5, right? They weren't like, 10 steps ahead of me. They were 2 steps ahead of me. I could bounce ideas off of and get some, insight that they had, because they were just there. So that was extremely helpful. But then again, like all the people you mentioned, Brooke, again, going through his book and bringing him on the podcast, listening to, the marketing thing that he said, again, it's like, hey, the waterfall, like you got to consistently pound the marketing before you're going to see a hockey stick growth. And again, like I said, he said that, and we stuck with it, and just, we've been using Vintory, been building out kind of our network, referral network, and really hammering the marketing. And like over the last 6 to 7 months, it really has been like hockey stick growth for us. I think we've just about doubled in a matter of like 6 to 7 months. So, and we're super excited about what the future holds. But again, and picking Steve Trover's brain on the hiring process, and again, just learning all that information. And Justin Ford, can't say enough about him. Just the safety. Just overall little tidbits from everybody and bringing them all together to just kind of create this great management company and provide good guest experiences for everybody.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Tony. And my mantra has always been help, don't sell. Just try to provide as much value as I possibly can, and it ends up paying dividends in the long run. But not looking for anything in return. But it's been a mantra that I've done, and it's always worked out pretty well. And first of all, I just love doing it. And like you mentioned, like this industry is incredible. The people in this industry are so amazing. The people in this industry are so helpful. If I could just pay a little bit forward, and I'm happy to do it. But I love your story of sticking with Vintory and being in that we call it the valley of disappointment. So what ends up happening inevitably is like people will start investing in marketing, and they'll lob out a postcard or two, and they inevitably will say, you know what, this doesn't work. But don't think of it as like wasted energy. You're storing that energy, and when you come out of that valley of disappointment, what ends up happening is it ends up actually coming at a much higher slope than you normally would think. But again, you have to be consistent with it, and it does work, but it takes time. And so I'm so glad that you stuck through it. This is why we don't sell contracts anymore unless they're at least 6 months or 12 months, just because we know that's very often how long it takes. And Conrad, I'm sure you've got lots of stories, being obviously a marketing master, more so on the guest side, where you've seen that valley of disappointment too.
Yeah, it's very much the case. And I would say some marketing channels that a property manager might engage in, they can see progress along the way. With homeowner, that's tough. So like, to give you an analogy with SEO, it's like the clicks and the rankings don't always come right away, but you might see a little flicker of like more impressions in Search Console. So it's like, all right, Google's showing my site more, but I'm not getting the rankings, but I can see it. It's like actual visual on the screen. With homeowner, it's kind of binary, right? Like I'm either getting a lead and I'm signing that contract, or I'm not. So I think people don't see what you're referring to there, Brooke. They don't see that momentum or like awareness, or the fact that like their postcard is on someone's desk right now, that they sent, and they're going to get that phone call, right? It just may happen 90 days after the postcard was sent. They don't see that when they're starting early on. So yeah, unfortunately, it's like, that marketing brand awareness thing is the hardest thing to measure. It's the hardest thing to feel like there's being progress made on. And you've got to stick with it to kind of see the right outcome. And I totally understand why it's challenging, because, you kind of feel like you're investing and not seeing that to return right away. So I'm sympathetic, but I'm also like, people need to hear that too, so they understand that there's going to be a journey to get where they're trying to go, for sure.
Well, the metaphor that I've used in many of my presentations that Tony actually was nice enough to talk about in a recent post is it's the arcade game where you drop the quarter in. You drop the quarter in and just pushes it forward, and eventually, when you continue to drop those quarters, you see them hanging over and they're about to drop. And just think of every marketing touch point as dropping another quarter out there. It's expensive and starts adding up, but eventually it does hit, and all those quarters fall down, and you get to get them. And I'm dating myself. I remember the olden days when they actually would give you the quarters as opposed to just tickets.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were recording this a little bit after this, obviously, but like the Super Bowl was this month still, like a few weeks back at this point. And like, how many brands advertise in the Super Bowl that you've heard of before? For me, it was almost every single one of them. I mean, there's one or two that I hadn't heard of before, but for the most part, like, I've heard of Coca-Cola. Yes, I'm drinking one right now. Like, I've heard of. So why are they spending $7 million on just a pure brand play, brand impression out of the Super Bowl, right? Like, we can make the case that Coca-Cola is not going to get significantly more brand awareness the day after the Super Bowl versus the day before. If you were aware before, you're aware after, there's not really any meaningful change, but is that brand reinforcement? So it's a big example, but the point remains of like, the biggest brands in the world are constantly doing investing into brand awareness. So you sitting in your small world marketing with, direct mail or doing some, homeowner marketing to your target audience, how could you possibly feel like you've maxed out your brand awareness when you've done 2 postcards or 3 postcards? Right, of course you haven't. Of course, there's a lot more meat on the bone, but people don't often think in that way. So,
well, even to go one more, and sorry to keep this going, but like, think about the car dealers ads. If you actually get the newspaper anymore, the Sunday newspaper, Toyota's advertising in the sports section every single Sunday in the Baltimore Sun. Every single Sunday, I'm looking at it and I'm reading it and like, but I only buy a car once every 5 or 6 or 7 years. You know what I mean? But when I am ready to buy that car, it's going to be there and top of mind. So again, it's just that repetition to be in front of them, and eventually it does pay off. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think we've been using Vintory for a year now. And again, I mean, we were literally just on a operations meeting the other day and just looking at all the new properties that we've brought on over the last, again, 6-7 months, but really in the last 3 or 4 months. So just constantly doing the marketing, doing the follow-up, and just, again, getting out there and networking as well has been a huge help.
Love it. I need to do a case study on that just to prove the point. Thanks, Tony.
Mm-hmm. So going a little more tactically here, Tony, with your next one, you talked about photography and not getting not just good photos, but great photos. Walk me through that process. How did you end up finding a great photographer, and what kind of impact has a better quality photos made in the marketing and the booking of the business?
Yeah. And so I think we found him in Facebook, and I don't even know at that point where like, we just kept on going through different photographers and we knew what we wanted. We just didn't know who could deliver those results. So we were kind of just cycling through until stumbled on this gentleman. And his photos are just top notch. I mean, I always say he's top 5 photographer in Michigan, but honestly, he might be like the number 1 short-term rental or vacation rental photographer in Michigan. So you do pay a premium, but I think it goes back to that homeowner marketing as well. Like, when you provide a picture that people are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's their home. They're sharing it with their friends and like, hey, check out the pictures they took of my property. It plays just as much on the homeowner marketing side as it does on the guest marketing side. But properties that have top-notch photos, I mean, I just feel like they come out of the gate 5 times faster than ones that have average. And I still think even a lot of the bigger companies out there, I mean, they're still just rolling with like the average one. So it is an easy way for, maybe a smaller property manager to come and really, shine above kind of the bigger ones.
So this was part of my secret sauce back in 2007 when I launched Vantage, because guess what? Back then, nobody was doing professional photography. Nobody. I mean, the pictures were awful on every single one of my competitors. So I actually went out and there was a magazine called Coastal Style Magazine, really high end, really nice looking magazine. And their photography was out of this world. I mean, and I looked at it, every one of them had said photography by Stephen Cherry. So I reached out to Stephen Cherry and it got him, and I, worked a deal with him where he would do all of our photos. And I don't know how I ended up actually negotiating a sweetheart deal, because I would just have him do it like in between, where he was in between gigs and things like that. And every one of our properties, we would do that. And it made our website look considerably better. We then had those photos for our website, just, obviously not just the property photos. We actually paid a full day for him just to go around. One of our key markets was called Sunset Island. Had him go around Sunset Island, just do lifestyle photos. So we had the best photography. So if you think about it, your storefront is your website. So, and exactly what you said, Tony, even though originally it was kind of for guests, what ended up happening is the owners loved it. And if you would look at our website and the photos of our properties, and I mean, the problem is he could actually make really subpar properties look really, really good. So unfortunately, you had sometimes when you had guests coming in there that were a little bit disappointed with what they got. But what it did help, though, is really on that owner recruitment, because when they would look at our website and they would look at any one of our competitors' websites, we were so far ahead of everybody else. And it reminds me of the quote from the master, Jason Sprinkle. He said, "Build a brand that is slightly better than you actually are." And that's really what we ended up doing. And that was one of the reasons, I think, or a big reason for our crazy growth.
Yeah. Well, I think, Tony, what you're hitting on there, and you drove that point home as well, Brooke, is this idea that like homeowners are savvy. Like I think some people think like they can only need to do some level of homeowner marketing and they get the right results. But what I've seen over and over again is like the biggest companies get the most leads because a homeowner goes and looks at a market and they say, well, I don't know, they're managing 500 other cabins or properties in this market. They're probably good enough, for that. So they don't often put a lot of thought into it, or they just assume that like this company's large, therefore they're good. But you're talking about, Tony, like merchandising and showing the property in the best light. They look at that and they go, oh, I want mine to look that nice. It's not always like they don't say they're hiring you because of the photos, but it's like this one of many clues that they're picking up along the way to that final step of, okay, I'm going to reach out to this company. So I think that's an underrated part of it. Yeah.
We brought on this property recently where the previous property manager had like 27 photos. And I mean, it was amazing. I mean, it had a tennis court, a pond, a pool, a hot tub, and like 4 or 5 bedrooms, nice kitchen, all that stuff, and 27 photos, which I mean, I think is pretty light for that. But we went in, had our photographer go in, and I mean, just crushed it. I mean, looks amazing. 2 months later, her friend that is 5 miles down the road, oh yeah, she was showing me the pictures. Guess who's on board? He came on board as well. So again, just that homeowner marketing right there. The pictures, it's something they want to share with their friends. And if they're thinking about a property manager, oh, look at what they did for my property. I mean, and it's like, that's their baby and it's showing their baby in the best light and they're going to pass it around. So.
Yeah. I love that. Awesome. Well, let's go a slightly different direction, although maybe you just touched on it there. You gave a little leaf that I can pull on there, Tony, with respect to referral programs. So not building a referral program out soon enough. As a real estate agent, it's easy to think that other agents are competition, but you interviewed someone on your podcast, Patrick, and he hammered home the point that building relationships with other agents is critical. So walk me through kind of how you do referrals. Is it with other agents? How have you made that lucrative or positive for them? How's that a win-win? How's that been working?
Yeah, so connected with some agents in the Southwest Michigan market. We're an agent too, like I said, and you would think it would be competition. Maybe they would be nervous that, hey, we'd sell the property when it comes to sell. But really just connected with them and built a relationship, and then let them know like, hey, just so you know, we do have a referral program, an incentive. If you have somebody that buys a vacation rental and they sign up with us, there is a financial incentive for that. And again, it's been great. It doesn't even have to be like a substantial amount, but just a little bit of extra icing on the cake has been huge. So we've probably picked up 4 or 5 just in the last, 6 months on that as well.
What do you pay them, if you don't mind me asking, Tony?
So we do 500 as soon as we get the first booking, and then we'll set a calendar reminder. And if it hits 100,000 gross, we'll give them another 500.
Wow. Which, think about it, that's $1,000 CAC, customer acquisition cost. And that property will do 100,000. So you'll make what, 20,000 on that property in revenue in the first year, but I would pay $1,000 all day long to get 20,000 in revenue. But remember, that's year one. That property is going to most likely stay in your rental program on average, 7 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Pretty good LTV to CAC ratio.
Yeah. And I mean, again, we have really good ratings and take really good care of guests. So it's like they're doing it because they also know that they can trust that their client's going to be in good hands and that we're going to take care of any guests that come to that property. So just really proving that to them too, that we are the best choice for them to send clients to as well.
I've kind of learned that one, Brooke. Honestly, I have a client that I started working with, or was like potentially starting working with, who talked about his referral program, and he's like, I pay out more than everybody, but he didn't do a better job than other people. So I think that is true, and what you always say, right? You got to build a great company, and then the referrals work better because they're like, Tony, I might have referred you anyways, but the $1,000 isn't a bad little reason to make sure that person signs. But certainly, someone's not going to refer if you're not a great company as well.
And
So
and that's the thing. I remember. So we partnered with a real estate crew in Ocean City, and that was what he always said. He goes, "Look, if I'm going to refer people to you, like you've got to take good care of them." He's like, "I cannot have egg on my face. I cannot have them coming back to me and just complaining about your services." So he's like, "Step one." He's like, you got to make sure that you're taking care of these people because, like, if I'm referring it out, like if I'm vouching for you in essence, like like they trust me, and I built a huge reputation. So that was obviously step one. So obviously we take them with high regard for sure.
Yeah, because all the realtors and agents, and I'm sure you know this, Tony, they're relying on word of mouth, right? Because you don't buy a house very often, just like the car comment from a few minutes ago on Brookside. So it's like your reputation matters to you a lot more than that $1,000. If you were in the other, if you flip the roles and you're referring the work out to someone else, let's say it was an area that you don't manage in, you're going to make sure you refer that to the right person. To keep that relationship with that person happy, you're not going to burn your bridge with someone over $1,000 because
Right.
oh yeah, he sold me the house, he did a good job there, but then he sent me to these jerks, that did a horrible job managing my property. That's going to leave such a bitter aftertaste in the mouth. So I think that, it's not a band-aid, I guess, is what I've learned, with that tactic. When you're doing it the way you're doing it, where you're already great, and then it's like a little cherry on top, I think it works well. But I've seen people employ it and go, I'll pay the most, but like usually there's a reason you have to pay the most. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a bad thing. Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's turn the page after referral. Let's talk about branding. So you kind of touched on photos earlier. There's obviously a broader, conversation when it comes to visual and overall kind of brand assets. So not focusing on building a premium brand from the beginning. Good branding will help you attract the right type of inventory. 4 years in, you're excited to rebrand. What's kind of that process look like? Is that ongoing? What's kind of the steps there that you're taking on the brand side?
Yeah, so we just signed a contract to do kind of a rebrand, gonna refresh the branding, the logo, website design, all that. Again, we got into it. We bought our own, bought another one, started taking on just a couple clients here or there. And now, we're down the road, and I don't know if our intention at the beginning definitely wasn't like, hey, we're gonna grow a property management company when we first got into it, right? And then we just started, again, just doing a little bit at a time. If we would have had the intention of like, this is what we want to do and this is who we want to be, we probably would have had a little more focus on the brand and having a great brand presence online. We don't have that right now. Other than good photos for half the properties, we don't have that. So we did just do the hotel project, the boutique motel in Grayling, Michigan, and worked with some really good people on the design side there. So we're like, felt like they really crushed it. And we're like, okay, now we need to move into doing it for the property management side. And again, we've lost out to clients in our area, and you go to their site and you're like, yeah, I know why we lost out to that client, so, or to that competition, because you can just tell. You go to their site, you feel the brand, there's a lot of intention that went behind it, versus us where it was like, hey, we're just getting started, we're just gonna this is what we're just gonna put something up until we redo it, I guess.
Well, this goes back to what I said before from Jason Sprinkle, is like build a brand that's slightly better than you actually are. And this is what I love about like living in a digital world. If you think about it, the old school, you had to invest in a big office, right? You had to have this huge office. You had to spend, a couple $1 million in building it and furnishing it and decorating and everything else. And then obviously, or if you're renting it, spend, $10,000, $20,000 a month. But the beauty now of a digital world is your brand and your reputation is really your website and your marketing that you're doing that. So again, going back to the pictures, like how important it is to have really, really good photography, and then really just building out a world-class website. You can be whoever you want to be. It's a fantastic time to do that. And I've seen a lot of companies that literally have had like closets and holes in the walls, or not even office. They don't even have offices at all, but they built these incredible reputations and brands literally just from a digital footprint.
Mm-hmm.
We're living in some great times here.
Yeah, definitely looking to refresh. Looking forward to refreshing that side of it. So excited. Like I said, we stumbled across this lady that did our site for the motel. She actually did a motel down in Georgia that I think won like an award for one of the best boutique motels. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what she can do on the property management side.
That's awesome. Well, going more on the accounting and bookkeeping side of things, talked about topic on these podcast episodes, as Brooke can attest to. Thinking that general accounting and general tools are sufficient for the financial side of the business. A lot of moving pieces, a lot of things changing. Getting it right in the front end and getting the right tools and software in the back end can save you a lot of time, money, and headaches. So, what's kind of that accounting and sort of dollars and cents bookkeeping side of the business look like today? How have you improved it as you've gone along, Tony?
Yeah, so at the beginning, it's kind of like, again, we got into it having our own, and it's like, oh, you get a bookkeeper, a CPA, and you start rolling, and then all of a sudden you see, a couple mistakes happen, and like on our end, we're always the type of people where it's like, oh, hey, if there was a financial mistake that didn't, on the owner side, we'll just pay, like we'll let them know, but then we'll also pay for it out of our own pocket. So because we didn't have the right tools and that kind of stuff, we've had to eat some money because of those accounting mistakes. So again, there's just a lot of great tools out there. Top Key, VR platform, and then for us, it's like OwnerRez and their property management side of it. So again, starting with just a general bookkeeper and now moving into kind of incorporating a lot more of those sophisticated tools that are designed for this particular industry. Again, there's just so many moving pieces in this world, man.
That's everyone's comment. How hard can this industry be? But guess what? You said it. There's a lot of moving parts for sure. It's so funny because I've seen numerous companies fall into the same trap. They find a general accountant or general bookkeeper. Like this is like find somebody that specializes in this. Find somebody and just like you nailed it and said in your mistakes. Find somebody that specializes in short-term rentals out of the gates. You know what I mean? Because it'll make it so much easier to have if your books and your financials are set up from the get-go, it'll make your life so much easier. I mean, hire somebody like Jen Ford who does this. You know what I mean? She can get you started, get you launched, and then even train your bookkeeper to make sure it's set up properly. It's going to save so much time and headaches down the road.
Yeah, end of the month, always a fun time in this industry, just closing out all the books and owner statements.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Brooke, how hard can it be? Look at a single booking and look at the fact that the money's going to two different places. We got fees, we got taxes; those have to go other places. Just look at a single 4-night booking, and you'll figure out how hard it is. Yeah. All that money going in all these different spots, and then you got to turn a profit at the end of the day, right?
Well, you know what? It's funny. It would be actually a cool infographic to show the flow of one reservation of everything that has to happen, not only from the accounting and the financial side of it, but from, like obviously all the communication with the guest, the cleaning of the property and just like inspecting of the property and just everything that has to happen, for one reservation. And then it's like, and when an owner complains, you're like, wait, you're going to take 20%? What? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen those ones, Brooke? They did these a while ago where it's like cost of an iPhone and it's like the glass is $40. The chip is $50. I think that's it. I think that's the graphic. We'll have to do something like that.
That'd be cool infographic. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, all right, let's turn the page a little bit back to kind of the homeowner lead side of things. So you might have touched on this earlier, Tony, but just maybe a deeper dive into it. You mentioned your mistakes, that not understanding exactly where leads are going to come from. And sometimes they come from unexpected places. So, someone that a midterm renter wants to buy a property. One of your other real estate agents that you maybe referred work to becomes a buyer. Someone who stayed becomes a buyer, wants to invest. A contractor wants to stay or become a future homeowner, all these examples. So what's kind of been that journey like for you, and as far as like realizing that maybe everyone can be a prospect in a good way, and learn from that, from a growth perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Steve Trover touched on it too. Like he would always do some marketing in the property to the guests, because the guests obviously love to come to that area, and maybe someday they'll like to buy a property there as well. But it's just, to me, it's just been mind blowing to see where all the customers or potential customers come from. Again, just closed a deal this week, actually. This gentleman stayed with us last year, and he mentioned, hey, I might have a property I want you guys to manage. So just consistently following up for, I think, 15 months, and then finally becomes a client. But I think, going into it, I would have never really guessed that it would have led to that. And again, on the real estate side, we've sold properties to guests that have come to stay with us. So I think it took us a while to figure that out. I think probably took us about 2.5 years before we're like, oh, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity from, the guest standpoint, or even, again, the vendor standpoint, and even other agents asking us to manage their property. So it just seems like an industry where like leads are everywhere, so.
I can't tell you how many leads I've gotten from vendors. I did a newsletter recently, and I talked about this. Whenever we'd have our maintenance guys or cleaners that were on more of a contract basis, I always intentionally held their checks. And when they came in, I had to give them. We would not mail them to them because very often they wanted to come and get them personally. So I would hold them in my office, and I would come out to the our lobby, and I would meet them, shake their hand, thank them for their work. Because again, those vendors are they're so critically important to your business. But again, if they build a relationship with and they like you, and like you mentioned, especially if you mentioned like you'll do a referral fee, you'll be surprised how many leads you end up getting. We got so many deals because guess what? They have direct relationships with a lot of these homeowners. They have direct relationships, with these homes, and obviously it's a great source. So yeah, it was a big portion of our inventory came through those sources.
You're spot on. We've seen some of the same too, just from vendors again, working in other properties, and maybe they're not. They just know they're unhappy and that they're potentially looking for somewhere else to someone else to manage for them, and treat the vendors right, and show them what you're doing for other homeowners and how you're taking care of guests, and they'll be one of your biggest promoters out there.
I have one client, Brooke, who's I think he signed 7 or 8 homes from his housekeeper, converting RBOs to be managed by him. So like this cleaner is cleaning for other RBOs, like rent by owner folks, and they'll complain or like have some little trigger of like, I'm having a hard time managing it. It's such a pain. I appreciate you cleaning. You're doing a good job, but everything else about this business just sucks. And she's like, oh, well, I clean for this management company. Did you know about them? Oh no, I didn't know about them. Refers them over. By the way, she gets a referral fee on top of that, but she likes working for this person. And then she's converted a bunch of RBOs over to him. So that cleaner is probably responsible for, back to your math, like $300,000-$400,000 of collected fees over the next few years, just from that relationship that he has with that person. So yeah, small market too.
Did that all day long, man. That was one of our top. I think I probably got just as many from cleaners as I did from RBOs as I did from real estate agents.
Yeah. I think this is also the same client that I work with that does a party for his vendors. So you were saying like, thank the vendor, appreciate them. Oh. I think once a year he does like, I think it's like a holiday thing. Like he has his team holiday party, and the next day they do a vendor party where he's like, come here, dinner on me, drinks on me, appreciate you guys. And he spends whatever, $2,000-$3,000, nothing too crazy, but in the grand scheme of things, those people love him and they love working for him. So
that is a brilliant idea. I'm add that to my list of top 10 things to do to, get more inventory that isn't a postcard,
Yeah. I'll tell you who it is when we stop recording, because I don't know if he wants me to put his technique on blast, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, we did that this year too. And again, we've seen we took them out for dinner and drinks for Christmas time. And one of the cleaners that was there has, again, referred us a fair amount of business. So.
Well, all right. So I'm going to go on a tangent, but there I'll tie back to it. So when I was I used to be in the mortgage industry. That was my first career for 10 years out of college. And I had this one guy, Vince, that was actually a friend of mine that used to work for me. And he would throw deals to this one of these lenders. We were a mortgage broker. He would throw deals to this one lender that was awful. The rates were higher. They charged more points. But I was like, Vince, why are you like set? He goes, well, they take us to dinner like once a month. Like, they take us to Ruth's Chris. So literally he's like funneling these deals to like, this other lender just because they take him to dinner. It's leveraging that rule of reciprocity,
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. The other one I've seen, Brooke, I don't know if you've seen this again, like the best vendor you have, like once a month. Hey, we got a gap in the calendar. Would you and your family want to do a little staycation in one of these properties? So it's like, I probably wasn't going to book it anyways. You're local. Maybe you guys come stay for a weekend, when the property that, during maybe a shoulder season, low season type thing. And that vendor is like, really? And they're like, yeah, like it wasn't going to book anyways. It's all good. You guys enjoy it, and then, it's like a bunch of goodwill from that, which it might have been lost revenue anyways, right? It wasn't like that booking was probably going to happen anyways if he calls last minute. So.
I like that.
Seen that one too. Yeah. That's a different person that does that. All right. Tony, we're coming to a close here. We got 2 more to punch through, and they're kind of related. Maybe we can kind of tackle these in one fell swoop here. So taking inventory in the wrong location and then keeping the main thing and avoiding shiny object syndrome. I feel like those are kind of cousins to one another. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but maybe walk me through both of those things, maybe going too far out location wise. And then how are you focused in, broadly speaking, on like exactly what you need to be working on to keep growing the business? Maybe we can take it home on those 2 points.
Yeah, I would say just so me and my business partners, I mean, we're shiny, like everything seems like a great idea, and we love kind of the start of something new, and just the excitement around that. And we've fallen into the trap of just chasing too many things, right? And over the last 6 or 7 months, we've also cut out, like we were doing some house flips on the side, and it's like, all right, that's just got to go. Like, and when you see like, okay, you get this one time lump sum, it's not reoccurring. You got to go find the next one. You're driving to properties, walking through them, spending so much time. Your time would be way better focused just on finding that next, management client. Again, like Brooke said, reoccurring, 7 years, and the value of that is so much higher than just kind of a one time, flip. So again, that's one of the biggest things that we've been doing is just like, again, ideas still come up, but it's like, hey, let's see it. Like, hey, property management, that's the thing. Like that's what we're focused on. So reining everybody in and staying after that. And it's hard because I think I'm the guy that, I guess, the rain man in this instance of bringing everybody back to focus, but I'm also probably the biggest culprit of shiny object syndrome as well. So it's tough, but
Brooke, do you know anyone like that? I don't know anyone like that. I don't know if you know anybody like that.
I literally, so obviously, Tony made every mistake that is highlighted in the book, making sure all secrets, of course. And I literally just flipped open and guess what? Page 100, chasing shiny objects. I mean, just by chance, I happened to pull that up.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, we're entrepreneurs. That's usually what makes us really good. But, as we, what someone once said is like, as you age, you get a little bit slower, but hopefully you don't lose the wisdom, or you at least have gained the wisdom. And, that's one thing I've learned because I've chased many, many shiny objects in my career and learned not to, even to the detriment of my team who, oh, Brooke, we have to do this new tool to do this. And I'm like, guys, we got to stay focused. But yeah, we've all fallen into this trap. Definitely.
Yeah.
I heard it. I don't know if you follow much from Alex Hormozy, Tony, if you're familiar with him, but I follow some of his stuff and I find a lot of it pretty engaging and interesting. And he had one the other day I thought was really good, which is like looking at the opportunity, holding in your head for a second and going, that is a great opportunity. Just not for me. It's not my opportunity. It's someone else's. And that's okay. Like, I think you just have to get that way of like, that's a cool idea. I had one recently where I was like, that's a cool idea. I started doing research on it. And then I had that on my mind, but it's just not for me. And I kind of pushed it away, got it away from me. And I went back and worked on what I needed to do. And that seemed to produce positive outcomes. So I think that's the way to do it. Well, awesome.
It's kind of like Amazon. It's kind of like Amazon. Yeah. Like, I find something on Amazon I really want to buy. I'll just put it in the shopping cart and just wait till the next day. And the next day, inevitably, I'm like, you know what? I really don't need this.
Yeah, that's a good trick. I'll have to try that one out.
Awesome. Well, Tony, thanks so much for hopping on. Brooke's got one more final question for you to bring us to a close here, but we appreciate this. This has been fun so far. But yeah, Brooke, do you want to fire the bonus one away?
Yeah. Well, Tony, thanks for coming on here. It's great to have you on after you had me on your podcast. So thank you very much. It's been great to obviously watch you and your journey and growing your inventory, leveraging Vintory. So thank you very much for being a Vintory partner. But yeah, the last question I have here is if you could go back in time and give your 25-year-old self a little bit of advice, what would it be?
I think I would go back and kind of what we just talked about, like figure out where you want to go, figure out that vision, and then stay hyper focused on that one vision, and give it everything you got until and see how far you can get. Right. Again, I think I'm been chasing shiny objects for a long time. So I think the more you can understand how important focus on one thing is, you'll see a lot more success.
Love that.
Love
That's
it.
great.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for coming on, Tony. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was awesome. Yeah. So my departing note here, Tony, is the listeners need to focus on one thing too, and that's leaving us a review. So we're not going to get awesome guests like Tony. Our kind of refreshed, revamped version here in 2025 is not going to be awesome unless we get more reviews. So go to your podcast app of choice, click follow, click subscribe. That way you get more episodes. And then also while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. Just like you want 5-star reviews for your properties on Airbnb, we want a 5-star review in your podcast app of choice. So thanks again, Tony, for hopping on. We appreciate it. And we'll catch everyone on the next episode. Thanks so much.